Hey, what's up, everybody? It's that guy Skimpy. Got my buddy Monty, one of the best spinnerbait bass fishermen I know.
Thanks.
He's going to be talking to our club about spinnerbaits, so I figured I'd record it and show you guys.
Hope y'all learned something.
All right.
I was wondering if you guys actually got like made an actual boat. Been fishing, bass fishing, and that's for about 40 years now. I started tournament fishing with Evergreen Bass Club out of Tacoma. When I was about 9 years old, I won my first tournament when I was 12 at Moses Lake. Beat all the guys in the adult side of the tournament.
To swim back to the
Yeah, there were a bunch of guys that were real butthurt and they wanted to change the rule thing. Kids couldn't fish with the club and all that. So yeah, it was pretty funny. My parents got a real kick out of that. I had to stop tournament fishing for a while because of work. Just didn't have time on the weekends to get out there and compete. Plus my boat shrank a lot. I grew up fishing with my dad. My dad taught me a lot about it. I learned a lot of stuff from watching TV, Bassmasters and Jimmy Houston and all that stuff. But that being said, one of my favorite techniques my whole life has been spinnerbait fishing. You can catch bass any time of the year, okay? Any time of the year on spinnerbaits. You can slow roll them in the wintertime in 40 feet of water. You get a 1 ounce spinnerbait with a big old willow leaf blade on it, chunk her out there over a big hump or the end of a point or something like that. Let her sink to the bottom, hop it up off the bottom, and then just start turning that handle to where you feel that thump of that blade. Okay. Some of the biggest fish I've ever caught in my life were caught on spinnerbaits early in the spring. Early, like when the water temperatures were like 40 degrees. Okay. Silver Lake especially. I caught one of my biggest fish. I caught a 5.5 pounder, just slow rolling a spinnerbait like that over some deeper water on a point. Okay. Let's talk about rods a little bit. I like a shorter rod when I'm fishing spinnerbaits, and the reason being is the cover that I'm usually up on the bank, especially during the spring and summertime and fall. I'm real close up on the bank, and I'm pitching this thing in underneath trees, overhanging trees, and pitching it right in the middle of brush piles and all that stuff. So I want something short that I can really get different angles on the thing, and I'm not having that real long rod that I'm having to fight and try to I'm not as accurate. I feel I'm not as accurate with my casting with a little bit shorter rod. My spinnerbait rod that I use is this Lew's David Fritsch model series. I bought it years ago. It's a 6.6 medium heavy. It has a lot of backbone to it, but it still has some tip, so I can actually flip that bait a little bit easier.
Fish can actually eat it.
Fish eat the bait. If you have too stiff of a rod, you will pull the bait away from the fish. I like a little bit faster gear ratio reels. I like 7.1, 7.5 to 8.1 gear ratio reels. I like, if you want to slow it down with a faster gear ratio reel, you can. You just crank the handle a little bit slower. But sometimes with those lower gear ratio reels, you can't burn them fast enough to get that speed up that those fish want to just come out and get that reaction bait hit that you might get burning a bait. I like mono. Because it stretches a lot. I've had problems with fluorocarbon on hook sets just popping. Because for some reason, ever since I was little, I set the freaking hook like a ton of bricks. And why it's not in his head, because more than once I've had a fish eat a bait at 10 feet off the boat, and I swing for the fences and pop, line pops.
The only thing comes in is his lips.
The only thing that comes in is the end of my line, because that doesn't even come back. But I figured out that I was breaking off a lot of fish the last couple of years, and it's because I was using too light a line. I was going to 12-pound test line, so I upped it. I fish 17-pound test. I fish a little bit heavier line. I've hooked up a lot more fish. They're not line shy. When they're eating a spinnerbait, they're not worried about line. They're gonna be coming up here and eating this bait right here, because that's what they're looking at. They're looking at that line that bait and not worrying about the line so much. Plus, the areas that you're fishing this bait into, you're gonna have to put some pressure on these fish sometimes to get them out from the cover where you're fishing them at. Some guys like fluoro. It's personal preference, but like I said before, there's actually absolutely zero stretch in fluoro. So maybe you go to a little bit lighter rod that absorbs some of that stretch from that fish eating the bait, and you set in the hook. You can also go braid to a mono leader or fluoro leader. I don't like it. I don't like using on my bait casting reels. I don't like going that way. One, I have a problem making a knot small enough to go through the eyelets of my front guide, and I hate it, and it feels weird when I cast and stuff. But if I'm gonna do braid, it's gonna be on a flipping stick, and it's gonna be heavy stuff.
That braid floats a lot, and mono sinks, which will kind of give it a weird look to this.
Yep. Let's talk about blades. So early in the year, I love Colorado blades. Colorados are big, round, circle blades. They give a lot of vibration. You can retrieve the bait at a slower pace and get the blades turning, and you can really feel that thump. Okay. So I like those in the early spring. I also like them in darker water, dingier water. So when you're actually fishing a lake that's got a lot of color to the water, you can throw that. Yeah, Silver Lake's great. You can actually get that bait slowed down so those fish can pick up that vibration, and they're not necessarily eaten by sight. When that water's muddier, they're feeling that vibration, and the more thump you can put into it, the better.
So you said the Colorado, are you using just one or are you using two?
So you can do one Colorado blade. I like that for, like I said, if it's early in the spring, because I like to get the bait just nice and slow and I get that thump. You can use tandems. Tandem blades work really well. I've done that later in the spring, summertime. They give off a lot more flash and stuff like that too, or not as much flash, but they give off a lot more vibration.
Now you're gonna put a Colorado and a willow, or two Colorados, or?
You can switch it up either way you want. It's really personal preference. I've got baits with, I got baits with a willow and a Colorado. I've got baits with two willows. It really just, to me, it's more color of the water is going to dictate what I do. Real clear water, I'm going to use willow leaf blades. The reason being is they give a ton of flash. I'm going to probably go to a gold colored blade because of the forage that we have around here. We have mostly perch, bluegill, that kind of thing, and they have, if you look at the perch or you look at the bluegill around here, they're going to have more of that gold color to them. Everybody looks at a spinnerbait and goes, what does that mimic? Well, it's a bait fish. It mimics a bait fish. Most bass are sitting below it. And if you've ever seen a bass or a spinnerbait run across just under the surface of the water with some video footage, that blade's back there on a willow leaf blade, and it's turning, and it looks like the tail of the fish kicking instead of actually the blade turning and creating that flash. So it's actually simulating the forage that they're eating. Like I said, twin willows, if it's super clear water, I'm going with that because I want the maximum amount of flash that I can. Like I said, blade colors, I like gold in clear water to a little bit of stain. I like painted blades. Anytime you go to a painted blade, I like that in dirty water or at night. A little bit dirtier water, you tend to see, they tend to pick up that color like a white blade or a chartreuse blade. They pick that up a little bit better. I know that smallmouth will absolutely annihilate spinnerbaits with painted blades on them. They love them. I don't know why, but they will just launch a spinnerbait with painted blades. There's also Colorado blades, or excuse me, not Colorado, Indiana's. Indiana blades is kind of like it's a kind of a in between the Colorado and the willow. Okay, it's going to be a little bit longer curve, but it's got that rounded shape to it. I really like that as kind of a crossover, and it gives a little bit more vibration. Still has a little bit more flash. Rick Clunn has his spinnerbait that he comes out with, and they have these really thin blades on them. That's another good option. They have those top knockers spinnerbaits. I haven't bought any of those yet, so I don't know if they work, but I've seen them catch fish on videos, but who hasn't caught a fish on a video when they're trying to sell a bait? There's all kinds of different blades. There's half moons, there's smile blades, there's all kinds of crap out there. play with them and you can figure out when they work best. But for most of my fishing, I'm going with willow leaves when I'm in the later part of the spring, early part of the summer into late summer, because the weeds come up. Willow leaves just tend to come through the grass a little bit easier, a little bit better. Bait sizes, so a lot of guys go with that 3/4 ounce. I like 3/8 ounce. That's kind of my go-to size, that 3/8 ounce spinnerbait. Every once in a while, I'll go down to the 1/4 ounce, depending on if we got smaller bait fish in the water. If you see big balls of bait and that kind of stuff in the water, maybe, and you're not doing as well with a bigger spinnerbait, shrink her down to a little bit smaller size, and maybe you'll start picking up a few more fish. They go all the way up to 1.5 ounces. I like 1 ounce baits for wintertime fishing. That's the big thing for me with 1 ounce baits. They're going to be something that I'm going to be fishing over deep water and slow cranking. Trailers. Let's talk about trailers. I like a couple different kinds of trailers. So lately, the small Kitex paddle tail baits, they've come out. They're really good. They have more of that boot tail. One thing on the spinnerbait, you can interfere with the way the blades are running, so make sure you turn the tail the right direction. If you start seeing the blades not turning correctly, then you might flip the tail over, or there's another way of actually trimming these tails to where they actually run and they don't interfere with the blades as much. You can actually trim the tails up on them. Wyatt's favorite, he likes to go to, is these single curly tail grub, like a 5-inch curly tail grub. Just worm it on there, make sure it's straight, and I like to go curl up. Some guys like to go curl down, but I like to go curl up. And you can slow them down. What the curly tail grub does is it adds bulk to the bait, so it'll actually float the bait. You'll get the bait up off the when you go to engage your reel, it'll climb a little bit faster. So if you're fishing a lot of shallow water, you won't have as much problems with it sinking as fast. And like I said, it'll climb up faster, and you can reel it slower, and it's going to have that nice little kick to that tail. I prefer anything that's got a split tail on it, like these Zoom. With a split tail like that, I like that because in the water, when they're coming through, these tails are just kicking and moving and doing all kinds of cool stuff. I like to, if I'm gonna fish white, I'm gonna fish maybe a white trailer, match it up with a white trailer, chartreuse trailer. You can throw black on there, but normally if I'm going white, I'll put a chartreuse trailer on it. Chartreuse, if the bait's mostly a chartreuse bait, I'll throw a white trailer on it just to kind of change it up a little bit. Bass Pro Shops makes a really good spinnerbait trailer, and they come in all different kinds of colors and styles and all that. But I like the Bass Pro Shop Tournament Series spinnerbait trailers. They're really good as well. I found these Zoom ones there. They're really good too. That's not a good color. You can tell by the lack of them in the bag. So colors. So a lot of times when you go on like tacklewarehouse.com or Bass Pro or anything like that, you can find all kinds of colors that are like white chartreuse. You can find the black, but they're all considered night baits. I sometimes will get some colors that are not standard, and I'll add those to my bait. I like black and white. Black and white is a good color. Black and yellow is a really good color. And I've caught a lot of fish on black and yellow because that's a perch color. Blue and chartreuse is really good. Straight white, straight chartreuse, depending on the water.
Thank you guys.
Oh, you're welcome. Depending on watercolor, if you're out fishing a lake and it's chocolate milk, throw bright colors. Throw that white, throw that chartreuse. They've also come out with some other more realistic colors. If you notice this trailer on this War Eagle, or this skirt on this War Eagle, it's got a lot of blue and gold and green and flake in the actual material itself. Simulates a bait fish really well. They make a War Eagle makes the chartreuse one that's kind of this same kind of see-through color. and it's incredibly well. I do incredibly well on that color. Black, don't be afraid to throw black during the day. Black works just fine, especially if you're in a little bit of stained water. That dark color, that it tends to help them find it. Retrieves. So in the summertime, there's times when you have to change your retrieve up to figure out what the fish want, okay? So sometimes the fish want it where you throw it out there and you are just literally burning it, and you're cranking this thing as hard and as fast as you can, and the bait has to stay in the water. So you want to get that bait just zipping across the water about an inch under, and just crank that thing as hard and as fast as you can, okay? That's just burning a spinnerbait. And what you're doing is, they're not necessarily hungry. Those fish aren't necessarily active, but that bait's coming past them so fast that they have to make it. It's like an instinctive thing. They just go out and slam it just because it's moving so fast. It's coming by. Blades. Get the biggest blade you can. It'll still make the bait work well. Get over some deeper water, or just find that little drop-off edge off of like a big spawning flat or something, and you got a ledge that drops off into 12, 14 feet, and just work that edge. Throw the bait out, let it sink down, and then just start slow rolling it to where you can just barely feel that blade thumping. Okay, and I've had some really big fish eat it like that. Anybody wake spinnerbaits before? Right. So what I want to do is when I'm actually waking a spinnerbait, it's usually in a shallow water situation where I'm pitching like way in underneath the trees or something like that, and I only use bait casting reels when I'm fishing spinnerbaits, because spinning gear, you just can't get on the bait fast enough, and you don't have the control and that kind of thing. So I only use bait casting reel. If you don't know how to use one, they're super easy, and it just takes some time out in the front yard. You'll figure out how to use them. But that being said, you throw the bait out, you get on it right away, and I get my rod tip up and I start cranking that thing, and I get the bait to where it's just underneath the surface of the water and it's making a V. Okay? That can draw a lot of strikes if you are waking a spinnerbait like that. So waking the spinnerbaits, those are good. Another good trick is stop and go. So looks like a wounded or dying bait fish, zing the bait out there, start cranking, dead stick it. Just stop for just like a half a second, and then get back on it again. And give it like 6 or 7 cranks, and then stop it. And then crank it again, stop it. Crank it again, stop it. What that does is it makes that bait speed up, and then it slows down and it starts to flutter a little bit. And then it takes off again, and the fish will start coming up behind it. And it may not want to eat it at first, but as soon as you stop it, it starts to die. They might eat it then. Or when you, 9 times out of 10, when you start cranking that reel handle again, boom, they're gonna freaking light it up. Another one I like to do is twitching. So throw the bait out, get it going, and I just pop the rod tip a little bit like that. Okay, I'll just pop the rod tip. I'll keep a nice steady retrieve, pop the rod tip. Pop the rod tip. What that's doing is that bait is flaring. The skirt on that bait is flaring like this, and it really gets them to eat it. It's imitating a wounded or injured bait fish, or maybe a school of fish moving, and it's just making that skirt flare. Anytime you can get that skirt to flare, awesome. Another one is, I do this with docks a lot. So I'm fishing docks and I'll throw a spinnerbait next to docks. Anybody throw spinnerbaits next to docks? Yeah. Shut up, you guys. Anyway, you zing a spinnerbait up next to the dock, and you're running it down the side of the dock, and right at the end of the dock, kill it. Just absolutely kill it and let it flutter. And a lot of times those fish, they'll be sitting there on the ends of those docks, and the minute you kill, they feel that vibration, they'll see all that flash, and then as soon as you kill it, boom, they'll eat it. That's a really cool way. My dad won a bass tournament over at Long Lake in Thurston County that way, and he said everybody was struggling, but he was bringing in really nice limits every day just by burning it down the side of the dock and then killing it right at the end of the dock, and they were just loving that. You can also do the straight retrieve, just a straight retrieve. Just throw it out and reel it. It works. I catch a lot of fish doing that. Usually when I'm doing that, I'm around a lot of cover though, and I'm gonna like if I'm in a pad field or something like that and I'm fishing the edges of the pads and there's like a point. Pads come to a point and I'll just zing it past the end of the point and I'll just nice, steady, slow retrieve it back. Another thing is, this doesn't work at Silver Lake, so don't do it. Pads kind of get a little sparse. Pads get a little sparse at Silver Lake. Take that spinnerbait and zing it back into the middle of a pad patch and just slow reel that thing over the stalks of those pads. And that thing will come over, and that bait, you keep the bait moving, you keep your rod tip up a little bit, and you're gonna get humped. You're gonna get stuck every once in a while, but as you're working that bait through those pad stalks, and that bait's just climbing up and over stuff, and it's changing direction, caught a lot of fish doing that. Another thing is come to a lay down log, okay? First thing I do is I throw all the way to the back of that log, all the way up to the bank, okay? And I will start bringing that thing back, and as the branches are coming off that log, okay, I run the bait up to it, and I'll bump that log. I'll smack the bait with that stick or that stump. What that does is it makes it deflect, okay, or it'll hit and get pumped. It'll do all kinds of different things. It'll throw the bait for a loop. Plus the noise of that bait crashing into the actual wood itself just makes a little bit different sound, and sometimes that'll draw a strike. Let's see. But I start all the way to the bank and I'll fish all the way around that thing and I'll cover every single angle I can. And the spots that I really focus on those trees is where big major branches or limbs are coming off of that main tree trunk. All those little angles or spots where those branches meet the main trunk of the tree, that's a key ambush point for that fish. So I will make sure I drag that bait through that area 2, 3, 4 times. Don't be afraid to throw it a target 2, 3, 4, 5 times to see if, because a lot of times there's a fish there. He's just not ready yet. And finally you throw in there enough with all this noise and flash and rattle, and it pisses them off enough to make them eat it. Any questions?
What's your preferred knot?
I type Palomar knot.
The what?
Anybody else got anything? All right, guys. Thanks for listening to me.
Hey, we appreciate it. Thanks, guys.